out of the gun. Manning lets it fly. It's caught by Thomas. There's the record for Peyton Manning.
Saludos and salutations, Broncos country, and welcome to another exciting episode of Broncos Talk. I'm your host, Adan Diaz, and joining me as always to my right is my co-host at Richie. Richie, how you doing tonight, my friend?
It's kind of a roller coaster, if you will. I think it's I always enjoy talking about the Broncos. I always enjoy our time together here. The downs of said roller coaster are obviously the results of our last game against the Las Vegas Raiders. So the ebbs and the flows, the ups and the downs. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Hey, you know what? Before we get things started, guys, I just want to say I have a complaint with our neighbors to the north here, Rich. It was nice and no snow on the ground when I woke up this morning. And around noon o'clock my time, there's like an inch of snow. And now it's like rain. So, it was great having almost a full December of no snow. I was able to drive my Mustang with no problem. But I don't know. It just, I kind of felt like we got dumped the leftover snow that usually heads up, Wisconsin and up in Canada. So I almost felt like it was a record, so to speak.
Well, you know what the problem is that directly north of you in the Chicago area, there's the prairies, and they've just hit minus 55 Celsius.
Mm-hmm.
I can do the conversion on that shortly, but let's just say it's really, really cold. So to put things in perspective, I was just one of the guys from Mile High Huddle had a tweet where he said, "It is really cold. Please save me." And he posted something saying it was like 12 degrees Fahrenheit, and that translates to minus 17. So minus 17 is like 10 or 12 or somewhere in that range. So you can do the mental math on just how bloody cold that is in Fahrenheit. And that's where they're at in the prairies and in that kind of central part of Canada. Welcome to the winter.
Welcome to the winter indeed, guys. And we hope you guys are staying somewhere nice and warm where you get to watch today's show. But anyway, guys, I digress. If you guys and enjoy the content that Rich and I here provide to you guys every single Tuesday here on Broncos Talk, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and that thumbs up to get live notifications on every single time we go live and stream. Of course, as you guys know, Broncos Talk goes live every single Tuesday at 7654, as well as our other shows here on the MHRT Network, the MHRT Podcast, the flagship show, which airs every single Thursday at the same time, 7654. On Fridays, we have the Nothing Rhymes With podcast that also airs on Fridays at 7654. And, of course, we have the pregame show, The Neighborhood, which airs just before every single Broncos game. And, Rich, we're down to our very last two games of the season, and fingers crossed, we do hope to get a playoff spot because that means more pregame show episodes for you guys out there. So I know a lot of you are saying, playoffs are up and done, and that's something that we're going to get into a little more detail later on in today's show. But, as a guy whose orange and blue colored glasses are almost stuck to my head, I'm always the more optimistic type of fella. So, guys, make sure you guys hit us up. You have our Twitter handles right on the bottom of our left-hand screens. Also, if you're watching us live here, if you want to ask us questions, please feel free to do so. We love to answer every question that we can, but just please remember that we will try to answer every comment and question to the best of our ability with time allotted. So if you do feel that your question or comment we didn't get to it, we do apologize. But like I said, please feel free to hit us up on our Twitter handles, and we'd be more than happy to answer them for you guys on the Broncos Twitterverse. So with that being said,
the other thing to add to that is if we missed answering your question during the stream, or if you thought of something after that you'd like us to maybe respond to after the fact, you can always use the YouTube comments after the video gets posted. Normally about a few minutes or so after the pod airs, it converts from the live stream into the kind of the posted ready to watch later, or video on demand style that YouTube is infamous for, really at this point. So feel free to just leave us a comment there, and I tend to go through them, at least once a week, twice a week, just kind of see if there's anything you guys are wanting to reach out for. So again, feel free to do that. Happy to interact with you guys, any means that you prefer. And this is, coming from the prophet, that is perhaps an elevated comment in terms of the issues there. You never like to see when the prophet is dejected. I guess at this point here, one also needs to start questioning the Oracle a little bit. There is a few things that the Oracle had said that I think that the Oracle may need to have some recalibration done. But by and large, I think that if the Oracle was looking at the general talent on the Broncos team, where we should likely be given some of the players that we have, obviously, certain groups aside on the team, I could see where the Oracle may have been going with some of it. But, this is a team sport, the ultimate team sport, dare I say, and you need all players on that roster to play up to par and be up to par. And obviously we were not in that last game.
Yeah, I do know that our boss picked out the title for today's episode, Rich, but this probably would have been my second choice. I hate losing, but I especially hate losing to the Raiders, as our good friend EJ here says. EJ, a loyal fan of the show, thank you so much for being a part of today's episode. And I totally agree with you, EJ. I mean, if it's one thing to lose, it's just the freaking Raiders. And not just losing once, guys. We lost twice. We got swept. And if you see how the defense went out there and just played their hearts out, and I mean, there's only so much you can do, you can ask of these guys. They played a hell of a game, our defensive side is. And as much as we would want to shut out the Raiders at home, and as much as we would want to have the Broncos defense not give up yardage or conversions, or, that very last play was just, it was more than a nail in a coffin. It felt more like a kick in the butt to Broncos country, where it was just, I mean, if you don't get, see, that's the thing that's really plagued this team, Rich, since Super Bowl 50. It's just the fact that no matter how good the defense goes out to play, the offense just can't seem to find that rhythm, that match. We have yet to be able to find a coaching staff where they can balance, like a scale. We need balance, Rich. If the defense is great, we need to find a way to elevate the offense so it's just as good. It doesn't have to be necessarily better. It shouldn't be a contest between the both of them, Rich. But unfortunately, and we've seen flashes. I mean, you saw what we did against the Chargers first time around, what we did against the Cowboys, but unfortunately, the only thing that's missing from those games, Rich, is consistency. We haven't found a way to consistently put points offensively every single week. We just keep getting these roller coasters. And is Bridgewater the guy? Yes, he is 1 week. 1 week he isn't. Is Julock the guy? 1 week it could be, the second week he isn't. So, and it just creates, not only does it create more problems, Rich, it just creates more, I don't want to say aggression, but I mean, you could probably say stress, but you could kind of see just the frustration between just the entire coaching staff as it is. That little altercation with Vic Fangio and Brandon McManus, that was something that probably, once you saw it being caught on camera, you were like, that's not a good look for a team, trying to make the playoffs, because every team going into the playoffs, Rich, no matter how good they are, one thing needs to be for sure: they need to play as a unit. They need to be playing as one. You cannot be frustrated, especially with your head coach, the one person who's in charge of calling the plays and making the decisions and all that. You cannot have that type of frustration. You cannot have that type of animosity within each other and expect to go out and try to make a championship run, Rich. It's not just going to work. So if the Broncos are definitely for sure out of the playoffs rungs officially this coming week, then that's an area of discussion that needs to be discussed. And if Vic Fangio cannot be the guy to rally this locker room together, Rich, then there's a really, really big problem in Broncos country.
I actually think it's far deeper than what you're getting at with the coaches, but I'm gonna put coaching aside for right now, and I'm gonna try and delve into some of the finer points. You said you bounced to special teams, to offense, so I'm gonna try and bring it back to the original and go all the way back to the offensive side of the ball. First off, EJ, that's how I got through the game. I went through a 6-pack. Anyways, with regards to the offensive side of the ball, that's why in the last few games here, I was kind of saying that offensive scheme, offensive style, and fitting the players that you have on the team into a proper offensive scheme and offensive style makes all the difference in the world. So, for example, Pat Shurmur in this game in the first half had a 2-to-1 ratio of running 3 wide receiver sets versus 2 tight end sets. And of the 2 tight end sets, only one of them, actually 2 of them, had the tight ends on the outside of the offensive tackles. Both of those plays where the tight ends were on the outside of the offensive tackles yielded some of our largest or biggest, or I'm going to take Tiki Barber's term here. That was a big gainer. So our biggest gainers of that particular game came off of those flanking tight ends on the outside. So I don't want to solely and completely point all the fingers at our players themselves, although I think there's a lot of blame to go around. There really is. But you need to put the players in the right position. And if you're not putting your players in the right position, the players are only as good as the plays that are being called. And so if the plays that are being called or the scheme that is being run does not fit the players that you have on your team properly, you are not going to win football games. For example, if you have a really, really light offensive lineman, unless the guy is some kind of freak in the weight room, it is probably not a good idea to start running power schemes with someone like that. They just don't have the power, But on the flip side, if you have a guy like Quinn Miners, and you've seen the last 2 or 3 games with him pulling and knocking guys out the way and winning like angry runs, for example, on NFL Network, as a result of that kind of chemistry, not once did Shurmur pull Miners and have him pull from right to left. There's all sorts of schematic things that just went all sorts of wrong in that Raiders game. And you saw Reisner attempting to pull from left to right, and you saw that he wasn't fast enough or strong enough to push Crosby out of the way from getting right into the backfield and basically, I've heard the word sack being used on the running back. I don't much care for that term because I think it conflates a quarterback sack and an actual tackle for loss. But it was a tackle for loss. We had a bunch of them as a result of the sieve that was our offensive line that game.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with that, Rich. And before I bring up this comment here or question here that EJ has for us, he does make a very good comment, which he says, Fangio does not speak to anyone on the sidelines except barking back at McManus. And that's exactly my point here, guys. And you guys all seen it. Whenever the Broncos win and you see Vic Fangio kind of giving away the game balls, that's the type of rallying that needs to be happening, not just when the Broncos win, but when the Broncos lose. Because, especially with Von Miller gone, Von Miller was probably the one guy who, through everything that the Broncos have been through the last couple of years, he was usually the guy that, was there to pick people up, at least spirits anyways. I would like to think so, him being the veteran and all. But now that he's gone and, obviously there's been a lot of questioning and comments and just trying to figure out, who's the new, leader of the team. And a lot of people would say Justin Simmons, which I wholeheartedly agree. So if that's the case, then I expect Justin Simmons to kind of, not just say in front of the media and tell people what they want to hear, which is, if you've been a longtime Broncos fan, you're going to know what sounds like, you're reading it off of paper and what actually sounds when you mean it from your heart, type of thing. So this team just kind of needs to get together and realize that when their backs are against the wall, when things aren't going their way, that it's just not to kind of, throw in the towel and, turn into the Jacksonville Jaguars or one of the really bad NFL teams and then just go out there, lose games on purpose just to try to play for a higher draft position next year. That shouldn't be the case. Every single one of these guys should be going out there and playing because that's what they're being paid to do. They're being paid to play until the very last whistle of the regular season. And if they make it to the playoffs or further, same thing. The buck doesn't stop once you've been officially eliminated from playoff contention. At least that shouldn't be the sentiment. Although we have seen cases where it's just kind of like, okay, they pull the guys that are injured or healthy or whatever, and that's understandable. But everybody else, it's a different show. But EJ here has a question here for us, Rich, before I turn it over to you. Do you guys think that there is any merit with receivers and tight ends saying Locke throws harder than Teddy? Maybe that's why the drops occurred. Rich,
No.
No. I wholeheartedly I agree. I don't think the fact that it was great to actually see Drew Lock throw past the sticks, which is something that we hardly saw from Teddy Bridgewater these last couple of weeks, Rich. And when we did see it, it was usually like for an incompletion or so. And I mean, if you take away just that one bad drop by Jerry Jeudy, he did have some really good catches here. There was one where he ran for, 15, 20 yards almost along the sideline. It was a great catch. So Drew's arm was never a question going in just becoming a Broncos, Rich. It was just basically his accuracy and his ability to read defenses and putting the ball where it needs to be. That's Drew Lock's biggest issue. And that's something that even though he said he's worked with coaches and Peyton Manning and what have you, his accuracy hasn't improved much to the extent. And, being in a division like this one and going up against Derek Carr and Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes, three of the biggest names and quarterbacks in this league, it's almost not fair to compare him because those guys are looking to make a playoff push and they're looking to be playoff contenders going forward, whereas we can't even figure out who's going to start next week, whether it's going to be Bridgewater or Drew Lock. And the fact that it's a question at this point in time is a problem in itself.
There was two throws that I saw that were dropped after rewatching for the second go around through the game that were thrown behind the receiver. So a less than ideal spot from Drew. That being said, if you're going to take a double digit salary in the millions at the wide receiver position, you're going to have to forgive me, but I expect you to make certain throws like that, a handful times a game. That's why you're making that level of salary within the NFL. You're no longer a rookie on a rookie deal. You are no longer a low-level player in the NFL. Once you're making that level in those upper tiers in the 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, 16, 17 plus. And like, I expect you to make better catches. I expect you to live up to what your reputation was when you earned that contract. So as an example, Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick both were known as kind of zip code style receivers. That's what earned them their contracts because they had several years where they basically caught almost anything that was thrown in their general direction. Then they get those contracts and it's really weird. We're starting to see those types of catches not being made. Especially Tim Patrick, who maybe he's hurt and he's kind of hesitant because I saw him not reach up for one in that game where he was along the sideline there. He would have typically jumped up and grabbed it, and he almost hesitated to do that. So I wonder if he's nursing an injury and he's trying to kind of protect himself a little bit. But either way, I expect you to make those types of catches as a wide receiver at the NFL level, making that kind of money. I just expect it. Similarly, I also think that I'm giving Noah Fant a bit of a pass on that one because he did try to reach back behind him to get it, and that was just not a well thrown ball. I mean, he made efforts, but he couldn't do it. I can give him a pass on that. But the Albert O one, the really good tight ends in the league kind of make that bobbled catch. They do. They just do. But I will also say that the cornerback on that particular play, which is one that people are kind of pointing to, certainly had his arm well behind the line of scrimmage and well after the 5 yards downfield. And realistically speaking, that prevented or that would have impacted anyone from catching the ball and really should have been called, in my opinion, as a pass interference. So I also think that Johnny makes an excellent point here as well, which is, I mean, I think we all saw the pressure that the defensive line of the Raiders was getting on Drew Lock. And I also think that we as Broncos fans that were incredibly critical of Drew Lock earlier, last year and for some of his plays and the way he was earlier in the year when he was thrown in as a backup, where he wasn't trying to trust his protection and stay within the pocket. I think by and large, he did really, really well at that in the game against the Raiders, even though his pocket was clearly breaking down at a rate that was just, I mean, no quarterback should have done what Drew was able to do in that game, in my opinion, given the pass breakdown protections that we were seeing. And we need to give credit where credit's due. He made some major progress in that game, particularly throwing the ball, throwing a few guys in stride. And if I can go back to EJ's comment there about the I'll call it an excuse, but a reason if you want to kind of go and be softer about it in tone. One of the things that Drew's arm allows him to do, more so say than Teddy, is Drew's arm allows him to throw into tighter windows because he has more velocity on the ball. So one of the things that that Teddy struggled with in many scenarios this season for us, and one of the reasons why you saw some marked improvement in the passing game, just generally speaking, was the fact that the arm strength is faster. He's got more zip on that ball, and he can fit it into tighter windows, not have the ball batted down. The ball doesn't flutter like it does sometimes with Teddy in the air. And some of those long balls that you saw from Teddy earlier in the season, you could start doing like a 4 count or 5 count until it got to the receiver, and then Drew, you just kind of just saw it zip through the air on the screen, and that makes a lot of difference in terms of allowing the wide receivers the time to get that extra step on the DB, as opposed to allowing that extra step to take place from the DB onto the receiver and make a play on the ball.
Yeah, and here we have another question here, Rich, from Bob Gaynor. Bob, thank you so much for joining the show and watching. And he says, y'all think Bridgewater will be back next week? And you know what, Bob? At this point, it could be anybody's guess. I mean, I did read a report earlier that supposedly Bridgewater had still not cleared injury protocol, and his return is still questionable at this point. But when you really think about it, though, guys, even if Bridgewater gets the thumbs up to play, do you really want to put a guy who I'm pretty sure, even though he didn't play last week, there's no way I would say that he's back to 100% that fast, seeing everything he's endured, especially that injury that he suffered on that game was really scary. Having to see anybody being carted off the field, Rich, is never a good side, whether it's a Bronco or anybody in the NFL. So I would just like to think that, I mean, for Bridgewater, I'm sure he'd like to, because he would probably like to add more tape to his resume should the Broncos not decide to, pay him $25 million, which at this point, it doesn't really seem fathomable for Denver to do. And, maybe he'd like to put on more tape to his resume so that way he can go to a quarterback needy team more so anyway, instead of them having to, take a chance in the draft. But I think that Locke will probably start this week against the Chargers. The Chargers are really beat up in their ranks, Rich. And as we saw just this past Sunday against the beating they took against Houston, one of the worst football teams in the league, mind you, they're really banged up. And I think for both of those guys, I think starting Drew Lock would be the better option for Denver. Not just because Drew Lock offers a higher ceiling in terms of getting a win, but just for the fact that there's really no point in putting out a guy like Bridgewater out there, especially with Denver's playoff chances literally almost slim to none. I mean, we need so much to happen. And even though the NFL is a crazy league, Rich, I just don't think that it's really worth Teddy's health. I appreciate everything he's done for us over the season, the highs and the lows and the so in betweens. But, your health is important at the end of the day. And Drew Lock is the healthier guy going forward. And, it could be that maybe Denver is officially eliminated from playoff contention after this week's game, even if they do win against the Chargers. So, and then that'll really put up a question of, who's going to start a meaningless game against the Chiefs' second and third squad week 18. But, that's a story for a different conversation, Rick. But to answer your question, I think that Locke starts.
So I think Locke starts this week. I think Teddy's going to be cutting it too close with the concussion protocol. I just don't think Teddy will play this week. That's just my opinion. Now it gets really interesting when you get into the Chiefs game, depending on what it means to us and that sort of thing. I also tend to agree with the general comment of the fact that Locke played pretty well as far as I'm concerned. In fact, I think he showed marked improvements, and as a coaching staff and as a team, you should be pleased the fact that someone has taken the time to show that improvement. He didn't throw a pick. He had some great throws that he made in that game. I think he made some great throws in that game. And frankly, if I can be perfectly honest, I think Locke made throws that Teddy Bridgewater is simply not physically capable of throwing. And I think that's something else that needs to be noted as well. And so then the question I really have to kind of, or even just question to everyone here is, if we could actually have run the ball against the Raiders, because that's the one thing that they really just destroyed us on in that game, is our offensive line was unable or incapable of moving the Raiders' defensive line in any direction for that matter. And as a result, our run game was non-existent. Drew Lock, I think, at the highest running yards or most running yards out of anyone on the team, and I think it was like 10 or 11, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in that range. That is not good.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, if we had a run game, do you not think that score or that game would have ended differently for the Broncos? Do you not think that we would have been in better position and likely won, given the fact that we held the Las Vegas Raiders to, again, under 17 points? I do. And then when you're looking ahead at the Chargers game and what we did to the Chargers the first go around, they're susceptible to the run. And you saw that in the Houston game as well. And their linebackers were really struggling with the running backs and short throws into the flat and stuff like that against Houston as well. So I really think that a quarterback like Drew Lock can really showcase talents. And as long as Drew can stop making or continue to not make those kind of boneheaded decisions where he throws into triple coverage or throws so far behind his receiver that the ball gets bounced up because the receiver's trying to make a play on it, I really think that Drew can really show out against the Chargers and kind of go head to head and win against Herbert and really maybe in some respects put to bed the fact that he probably should be starting against Kansas City regardless, because it works out as a win-win at that stage for the Broncos. If the Broncos are wanting to move on at the quarterback position in the offseason, and rumors are rumors and they normally have some validity to them, then Locke playing as well as he is right now, and if he finishes out, you want him to finish out strong so that he has a higher trade value.
Mm-hmm.
So it works out in our favor to play Locke for the remainder of the season if they wish to trade him in the offseason. Now, if we wish to keep him around and go after a veteran quarterback in hopes that maybe Locke can kind of grow and maybe we sign him to a kind of a cheaper contract to have him grow under a more seasoned veteran, like some of the ones we've seen thrown around, like the recent one that's really seemed to gain more traction this week is Aaron Rodgers. And so if he sits behind an Aaron Rodgers and we maybe re-sign Drew on a cheaper kind of backup style contract to learn behind Rodgers, well, that's an interesting, thought process and maybe discussion to have. And again, you want someone to get that starting experience in case Rodgers gets banged up, because if we can't fully fix our offensive line, Rodgers is rolling into 38, 39, and 40. And, when you start getting up into those ages as a quarterback in the NFL, injuries can certainly happen more frequently.
Yeah. And Steve Sarkovich here, a good loyal fan of the show. Steve, thank you so much for tuning in. He says, how can Fangio stand behind Shermer still? Do they / does he not see how poor our offense is? You know what, Steve? That's a really good question. And that's a question that I'm pretty sure everybody watching a Broncos game or just in tune with the Denver Broncos in general is just really asking themselves. And you have to kind of believe that for them to fire Scangarello 2 years ago and bring in Shermer and expect him to kind of be the quarterback whisperer to Drew Lock, I mean, you think it would mean something. And this is coming from a guy who I was shocked about that hire, But at the same time, I was like, okay, well, Pat Shurmur did want to draft Drew Lock in 2018 with when he was with the Giants, but the Dave Gettleman, their GM, decided to go with what's his name, Danny whatever. I can't think of his name right now.
Daniel Jones.
Daniel Jones, thank you. So they decided to go with the Daniel Jones, a quarterback that damn near nobody's heard of unless you're really into college football. So, and Drew Lock just happened to fall into John Elway's lap with him, moving down and moving some pieces around and getting the quarterback that John Elway wanted. So I was like, okay, and I thought it was going to be one of those, well, you know what, if they're not a really good head coach, then, they're going to make a really good offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator or what have you. So I just thought that it was that it would be a great thing for Drew Lock, seeing as how he was looking to be the guy, the future quarterback of the Denver Broncos. But 2 years later, Rich, and unfortunately, it's done more bad than good. And it's more likely for Pat Shurmur to get fired in 2 weeks after the very last game of Week 18 than it is for Drew Lock to possibly leave Denver for good. I don't see Drew Lock as the future starter, but I wouldn't be surprised that if the Broncos do out and get a big name like a Russell Wilson or an Aaron Rodgers, that Drew Lock would settle to, playing behind one of those guys, learning from them, and possibly seeing where the Broncos are when said veteran quarterback leaves or retires.
Yeah, I think that Lock would probably not be as agreeable to doing something like that behind a Russell Wilson, just based on age. Maybe more agreeable to looking at a short-term, team-friendly style extension to allow himself to play behind, say, an Aaron Rodgers, who may or may not have the will to or want to play, like a Tom Brady is into his 50s. But I realize Tom Brady's not that old, but he's ancient by NFL standards. But to answer this question, that's just my personal opinion. Is that Scangarello and Elway, Glenn has posted what I was about to say. Scangarello and Elway apparently did not get on well. I didn't hear Scangarello and Fangio not getting along well. The stuff that I have heard is that it was largely between John Elway and Scangarello in terms of infighting on the offensive side of the ball. Fangio, from what I have heard, again, this is kind of, there's some articles and stuff that I've read, and it's largely kind of me extrapolating from those, where Fangio was largely focused almost exclusively on the defensive side of the ball, which most people suspected anyway, and that the offense was left kind of to run itself, and then Elway was kind of dabbling a little bit, is my understanding, on that side of the ball a little bit more, even though he was a GM. And then Scangarello and Elway, from what I was told, just didn't get on. And so the decision was made again to move on from Scangarello to avoid the that butting of heads. And we brought in Shurmur. The problem with bringing in Shurmur is that Shurmur is very much one of those old school coaches that says, I have a system, you play to it. And in order for you to bring in a guy like that, you need to largely have the players that fit his style and his system. And, offensive line being one of the most critical pieces there, we don't have a ton of guys that are really well suited for the power style, that Shurmur likes to run, or that running style that Shurmur likes to run. We were better suited, and we had players that were, we'll just say, better aligned with the Rick Scangarello offensive style of play. Right?
Yeah. And before we get into our next segment, part of the show, Rich, we just got some breaking news here from our good friend Glenn Hauser, who who tells us that unfortunately John Madden, NFL legend, has just passed away. So very sad news to hear tonight, guys. For those of you who don't know, but I'm pretty sure everybody here, if you know football, there's no way you don't know who John Madden was. He's his name ran, just down the halls of football, Legion Ledger. And, he was a coach, a championship coach at that for the Raiders. And then when he retired, he became a really good color commentator. And of course, I can't think of any person that doesn't love the NFL Madden EA franchise. So, Rich and I would like to offer our condolences to the Madden family. And I just want to say that the football world just lost a really big, big name in football.
Yeah, there's no replacing someone like John Madden. However, a good portion of my culture, certainly the one that I kind of identify with the most, is Irish, and our traditions, if you will, are far more aligned with remembering the life of the person and what they did and their accomplishments and all of the good things. And that's basically how I choose to remember John Madden, for the commentary, the contribution to really expanding the NFL and into the video game side of things. So you kind of expanded the NFL's reach by going into, the EA franchises, and really done a world for the NFL, both on the field and coaching, and after his retirement, both commentary and the gaming franchise. So condolences, I agree, to family, and just an NFL great. Really an NFL great, and I hope that I hope there's something that's done before the majority of the games this coming Sunday to pay the respects for John Madden. Just you don't have people like that in the game very often.
Very true, Rich. And it doesn't matter that he wasn't a fellow Denver Bronco. I mean, he paved the way for a lot of the greats. Whether doesn't matter what team they played for. I mean,
Right.
He will be sorely missed. But to kind of switch gears here, Rich, I think it's
we got to move on to the segment involving hills.
And what would that segment be, Rich?
That would be the Mile High Mountain.
Okay, I may have mistimed that by a second, but I'm still getting the hang of it.
Yeah, I think we have to have a chat if you can't hit a play button. But anyways, so I'll go first, as I've done the last couple weeks, and then you can go ahead and go from there. So my Mile High Mountain, this was actually a really hard one for me to do. There was only a handful of players that I really felt played well enough to make it at the top of the Mile High Mountain. This one here may surprise many. However, at the summit for me this past game was Drew Lock. Drew Lock, I think if we're going to give him and heap on the critique of his throws, the way he's played all those previous games in the 2020 season, I think we need to give credit where credit is due. Drew threw great balls for the most part in the game against the Las Vegas Raiders. He did not throw a single interception in that game versus the Las Vegas Raiders. I can speak eventually. And you also have to remember, he did that all with a porous offensive line and zero, for all intents and purposes, running game. So credit where credit is due for Drew Lock. So he is atop the summit for me, based on his play that game against the Las Vegas Raiders. On the rise, I have Bradley Chubb. I thought that he had a heck of a game. I thought he showed out and showed up and showed us what a 5th round draft pick in the first round is supposed to look like. He showed patience when he was following Derek Carr's eyes to get that batted down and intercepted ball that he returned back for almost a touchdown. He should have pushed just a little bit more, but hey, beggars can't be choosers, and he had one heck of a play. And then I have an honorable mention for my on the rise, and that is Jonas Griffith. I really think that he had a heck of a game as well. He was just a notch below Bradley Chubb, so he didn't quite make the cut. At base camp, I had Brandon McManus. That's the second or third game now in a row where Brandon has missed a clutch kick. He has one job to do, and that is to kick the football. I also do not like the fact that a leader and a captain on the team is coming back to the sideline and chirping at a head coach in public view. I think as a player and as a leader on the team, you should not be doing that. You are setting a poor example for the younger players because that is an inappropriate way, and that is not how you address a head coach. I would not be surprised if Fangio has pulled him aside separately, privately after that. I'm sure they've worked it out, but nonetheless, you just don't do that publicly. It's just not a good look for the team. And on the play ride home, we'll say this is a larger playing this week. I have the entire offensive line and Pat Shurmur. I really do not think a single one of our linemen played particularly well at all. I think that each and every one of them had multiple plays that they would prefer could get erased from everyone's memory. If you've ever seen Men in Black, they have that little thing. I think that they would like to use that on several people or the entire world rather, for several of their plays each. And Pat Shurmur. Again, if you can't scheme to modify and tweak and work around the fact that your run game isn't working, that is something that you need to do as an offensive coordinator at the NFL level if you wish to be considered one of the good ones or even decent ones. And he is neither. So those are my Mile High Mountain picks for this week for the Vegas game, the Raiders game rather. And here's hoping for a much better game against the Chargers.
Yeah, those those are very well picks here, Rich. And for mine, on top of the summit, I actually have Bradley Chubb. I thought Chubb played a really fantastic game. I mean, that one-handed catch, bring it down. I mean, he was literally an inch short away from making that a touchdown. So to me, that was amazing. I mean, he needed to be where he needed to be. He didn't have to struggle. He was probably, aside from the Angry Aviator, probably the only two who were able to kind of beat their designated guys in this game, Rich. Unfortunately, I did see Malik Reed kind of struggle in trying to get past his designated defender or offensive lineman. And not only that, but there were a lot of times where he either missed tackles or he just kind of didn't go after the ball. Josh Jacobs, unfortunately, should not have had that big of a game as he did. I do know that the defense was without Kenny Young this game, unlike the first time around, and it definitely showed. But at the same time, I do believe that it was a struggle. It was definitely a struggle, and this defense definitely needs a guy like Kenny Young back into its lineup. For the on the rise for me, even though the Broncos didn't do all that much rushing, I think Javonte Williams played a good game. He did have the only touchdown of the game, so to speak. So the fact that he was able, even though it was at the 1 yard line, you still have to get past those big guys. And that was probably the only time the offensive line did anything right in terms of trying to get a hole open for Javonte to get in. Plus, Javonte, even though he's not one of those goals and gets 30, 40 yards time, he's just fun to watch. He's fun to watch run between tackles. He's fun to see spin and just to kind of see how far he can go before he finally gets taken down by like 2 or 3 guys. So he's always a fun guy to see, and he's definitely going to be a star here with the Denver Broncos going forward. Drew Lock was probably my honorable mention, even though he didn't have a passing touchdown. Those drop passes were not on him, and he went an entire game without an interception, which is definitely a big upside for him. So I commend him on that. But not being able to beat a team, especially when the defense gave you the ball, 2-3 times on turnovers, and not being able to convert them into touchdowns and usually having to settle for field goals, is definitely not good. At the base summit for me, I have Vic Fangio, because I kind of feel that Vic Fangio getting swept by a team that, especially the way this game ended, and not really doing your homework and trying to get to putting the pieces together to see what you didn't do right the first time around and trying to do it better the second time. I mean, obviously defensively, his defense played spectacular. That's not a question here, Rich. But the offense, he's still not being able to get it right. He's still letting Pat Shurmur get away with all this crap that a lot of us, Dan will know, should have been stopped a long time ago. And it to me, that falls on him. This loss, getting swept, that falls on him. So the fact that he actually went out and said that he feels he deserves another shot at being head coach next year is pretty brave of him to do, and pretty ballsy, let me just say. So he just better hope that George Payton has that same sentiment, because Joe Ellis and John Elway, Rich, in 2 weeks are more than likely out the door in terms of being done with the Broncos organization in full. At least I think so. That's speculation. Don't take it for a fact. And when George Payton has full control and he picks his own head people, then we're going to start to see those people that were hanging by a thread initially by the likes of Joe Ellis and even John Elway are more than likely either going to be shown the door or traded or what have you. And for the flight home, Pat Shurmur, and you can probably hook a seat outside for Tom McMahon too. If there's no room. I mean, Pat Shurmur just doesn't get it. He's still not being able to switch off between two quarterbacks. He's not using them to their best of their abilities. We've gotten away from the screen passes again. For some damn reason, we got away from the running game. Seeing how the Raiders were beat, especially them being able to stop the run, it hurts your head, Rich, and you can't seem to get it. And as we're going to go forward into this the next segment of the show in just a little bit, we're kind of at a point where we're tired of saying hopefully Shurmur can figure it out. I think we're way past that point here, Rich, where there's nothing that Pat Shurmur can figure out now, because he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to use what he has effectively. And as a lot of people in the chat have said, it's just great wide receivers going to waste. It's great defensive talent going to waste. It's just a lot of things as a whole, Rich, going to waste, and nobody in the coaching staff seems to give a damn.
So there's a couple things you said in there. It's actually really funny that first off, I just want to showcase EJ here. I agree. I have had some critical things to say about Shelby after getting his contract as well, and he really showed up. I really have to give credit in that game where credit is due. Shelby really showed up. I was impressed. He got pressure on a somewhat consistent basis, not super consistent, but somewhat consistent basis. He got pressure, which is what you need for a pocket quarterback like Derek Carr. And you made a comment actually in your Mile High Mountain. Malik Reed, you had in kind of the bottom kind of tier there at base camp. It was just funny when you said that. I had to scroll back up and look at my first half notes. I'm just going to read one of them to you because it's actually really funny. Malik Reed was looking like he was making a series of business decisions. He was dropping. No, I'm serious. These are my notes. He was dropping his shoulder and leaning under the guy that he should have actually wrapped up and tackled, as opposed to just tackling him. Mm-hmm. And that's literally my note that I have here from midway through the first half in that game. And when you have a guy that jumps out at you like that for, basically making a worse than Teddy Bridgewater, like as an outside linebacker, the last part of your title on the team is linebacker. One of the major things in a linebacker is tackling. Like that's literally one of the top things in your job description is tackling a person. And I kept on seeing over and over and over and over and over again Malik Reed kind of do these like drop shoulder things and not wrap up and tackle. And I'm not going to lie, a lot of my first comment, as soon as I saw the first 2 times where he was doing it and he just kept on doing it throughout the game, it's almost like he and his agent have said, Denver's not going to make it much further than this. You need to protect yourself so that you can get a big payday. That was the first thing that came to my head, is that he's making a business decision to protect his body so that he can get paid big and not go into the offseason hurt. And I hate to think ill of players like that. I hate to think that someone's doing something like that. But I'm going to be honest, he's a football player. I've seen him attempt to make tackles before, so I know he can do it. I have no other explanation for a guy that keeps doing the same thing that's not working over and over again when he knows to do something else.
Yeah. And before Rich takes us into our next segment, guys, we do have a pop-up question that I feel Rich and I could answer real quick. Would Ed Donatel consider staying as defensive coordinator if Fangio was fired? And Dave, this is actually something that a lot of us here at MHRT have discussed. And I think we're all in agreement that if Fangio goes, Ed Donatel goes, more than likely. He's going to follow him wherever he goes. Ed Donatel could have stayed in Chicago in 2018 and been the defensive coordinator for the Bears. But Vic Fangio talked him into coming into Denver and letting him, well, at least we thought he was going to let Ed Donatel run the defense and let Vic Fangio, work and getting the head, not just the defense back in order and shape, but whipping up the offense as well. So I would have to say that if Vic Fangio is fired or Vic Fangio leaves, Ed Donatel is more than likely going to leave. I don't think there's an amount of money that the Denver Broncos themselves can offer Ed Donatel to stay, which is kind of sucks when you think about it, because he knows everything that Vic Fangio knows. And this is not one of those, he studied under Vic Fangio branch tree kind of guys like you have with Brandon Staley and a bunch of other people that have worked under Vic Fangio over the years. No, this is this is Vic Fangio's little second guy who knows every single defensive run, every rush, every blitz, every cover, all that stuff. He knows it all. That's why he's able to call it. The only difference is that he probably sends one call down to Vic Fangio, and if Vic Fangio doesn't agree with it, he has the power to change it. So that would be my only comment.
I'm going to disagree. And here's why. Vic Fangio is always an elite. I mean, have you heard some of the people that are playing against us and the praise they have heaped on him in terms of his defensive prowess for Vic Fangio? I mean, it is crazy. So I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think that in my opinion, I think that a new head coach, if Vic gets fired, may well directly approach Donatel and ask him to stay on. Now, Donatel will I think what hinges on this is, does Vic get hired immediately as another team's head coach? Because if that answer is yes, and he does get hired by another team to be their head coach, I think Ed Donatel is gone and he's the DC for another team, not the Denver Broncos. If Vic Fangio, however, does not get a second crack at being a head coach immediately in the offseason, then I think that there is a legitimate possibility that Donatel may well stay on and may well say, I am willing to stay on as a defensive coordinator because there is a significant pay bump to being a DC versus one of the assistants within I think Donatel was a backs coach, a backs and linebackers coach or something like that when he was with Fangio in Chicago. And so, yes, you've grouped two position groups together, which kind of gives them a little bit of an elevated pay scale in terms of within the defensive room there, but it's not the same pay scale that you're getting as a DC.
Right. And with that being said, guys, Rich, I think we are ready for the second part, or the third part. Yeah, the third part of today's show, which is, remind me again, Rich.
Oh, this is the Hot Five, and we have Bolt Pride Worldwide.
Bolt Pride Worldwide. I can't say I know who that is, but I'm excited. Hopefully you guys are too. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, MHRT proudly presents the Hot Five.
This is Alvarez of Bolt Pride Worldwide, coming to the Broncos Talk. I'm honored to be on this, be part of this conversation. I'm the leader of Bolt Pride Worldwide. In fact, this is our 30th anniversary year. Bolt Pride Worldwide started in 1992 here in the 619 in San Diego with 4 of us. And now it's worldwide. So I'm honored to be here joining Broncos Talk. The conversation, the question really was, what are the 5 things my Chargers need to do to beat your Broncos? Well, I have to tell you, we only have a brief amount of time. If any of you out there watched my Chargers give a gift to the Texans this last weekend, we need more than 5 things. So it's really that simple. It's what, week 16? There's a lot of this coaching staff has had 15 weeks to get this right. But these 5 things, it really gets down to the fundamentals. You got to come in with a game plan. You need to be able to execute that game plan. You need to control the line of scrimmage on the offensive line and defensive line. You need to play 3 phases. I want to see my team play 3 phases. We're not going to use injuries or COVID as excuses. Next man up, get in there. And my team has, I believe my team has the players. Herbie is a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed watching Herbie, even when you beat us in Mile High. And now you're coming to SoFi. I will be there. So Broncos Talk, if you're there, come see the Bull Pride Worldwide family in Thunder Alley, the Pink Zone. I'll be there starting at 9 o'clock in the morning. So please join us. But, we've got the players. I believe in this coach, Staley. We're giving him the benefit of the doubt. He seems grounded. But now you have to have that game plan, and you need to be able to coach the players. You need to be able to make those adjustments during the game. And I believe we have what it takes. Now the record says you are what your record says you are. Right now we're 8-7, just 1 game over 500. So that's who we are. But I believe in this team. Can they make a run? Yes, they can make a run. Can they? If they get into the playoffs, can they deliver? I sure hope so. But, we are fans. I know this. Well, you also have Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater gives my team trouble every time. He can wear a Panther uniform. He can wear a Bronco uniform. Teddy Bridgewater, respect for Teddy Bridgewater. And but in this case, I can tell you this. We're fans. In fact, Bull Pride Worldwide, the 4 things I would ask you to know about Bull Pride Worldwide is it's about the Chargers. It's about family. It's about respect. It's about having a great time. That means we have a great time with Bolt fans, with Bronco fans, with friends from across the NFL. In fact, I'm a member of Pro Football's Ultimate Fan Association, so we will welcome fans from other teams. But at the end of the day, this weekend, it's going to come down to this. It's going to come down to the team that makes the most plays and fewest mistakes. That's it. They'll either be wearing a lightning bolt on their helmet, or they'll wear a Bronco on their helmet. But we're still fans. I'm looking forward to it. I know that we don't have the time for everything my team needs to do to be successful against the Broncos this weekend. It takes a number of things, but I believe in my team. I believe if they didn't learn their lesson in Houston, they will lose again. But I'm optimistic that they will learn. I'm optimistic. I love that we have a great quarterback, great young quarterback. He's gonna give us some fun times, and let's just hope that those fun times begin this weekend and continue through the rest of the season, and then we'll see what happens. So until we talk again, and until we talk again this weekend, good luck to you. Good luck to your team. I'm honored to be a part of Broncos Talk. This is Alvarez, Bull Pride Worldwide, baby. Out. Woo!
There's only 2 things I liked from that video, and that's the fact that I saw the word Mexico on his coat and the fact that he said 619. So, shout out to Rey Mysterio, 619, my favorite one of my favorite Mexican wrestlers of all time, I should say. But other than that, thank you so much for coming on the show, Alvarez, your energy. And it sounds like even though you're a rival, you sound like a guy that I'd love to crack open a beer with and just argue football with all night.
He was definitely a great guy. Great guy. Love the conversation. He knows quite a number of the super fans within Broncos country as well. So and definitely is well respected amongst the pro football fans group. If you guys have been watching Broncos Talk for a while, we had Frank West on from the Jets for one of our first Hot 5 segments. Frank and Alvarez know each other. Alvarez knows Mile High Prophet and that whole group, captain defense. They all are a very kind of relatively close-knit group, and they kind of all know each other. So it is great to have someone like that to give us some insight into the Chargers and what they need to do to try to beat us, and then we can review that and see what we need to do to counter some of those points.
Yeah, this is probably the one time the Broncos get to play spoiler, I would say, the only time I should say. Not only is this a revenge game for the Chargers, but the Broncos are looking for a sweep. So this would be a big moral victory for the team going forward, Rich. And even if this doesn't get us a playoff spot, if we fall short after everything is said and done at the end of week 17, I just believe that going into week 18 against the Chiefs would be just a huge, huge morale boost for this team. And they just basically need to do what they did before. And like I said earlier, Rich, the one thing that the Chargers have going against them is the fact that not only are they beaten battered more than they were our first time around, but they're not playing with most of their starters. We didn't see Austin Eckler play in Houston. We saw Justin Jackson. And I don't know if Chris Harris also played either, but I do believe that COVID. So there's a lot of COVID players on the Chargers. So there could be a chance where Herbert is going to have to trust his safety behind, second string offensive linemen, where the Chargers defense is going to have to go with practice squad guys or second string defensive players. Whatever weaknesses the Chargers are offering the Broncos when they touch down on Saturday, the Broncos have to take full advantage of it, Rich, because if a team like Houston can do that, can take advantage of a really depleted Chargers team, there is no reason or way why a guy like Drew Lock cannot do what David Mills did to that Chargers team. And I know that's saying a lot, but can you imagine a guy like David Mills, if he had wide receivers in Houston like he does in Denver? That score would have probably been a lot more deeper last week. So I unfortunately, I don't really like to play any team without their star players, because I kind of find it, you probably end up with what you saw against the Cowboys and the Washington football team, just a giant stomp. And that's really not good football for anybody, but unless you're a Cowboys fan, obviously. But I do, it's a next man up type of league, Rich, and you have to do what you have to do to try to get a win. And if that means going up against a team like the Chargers, who are not at 100%, then hey, I wouldn't feel bad if we just happened to knock the Chargers out of playoff contention.
Right. I certainly wouldn't be, upset if we were to do something like that. However, you also have to remember is that the Houston Texans had guys that they signed just a few days before the game who played well for them. So, I mean, I don't think it's fair for any team to sit there and say, oh, I don't have so-and-so, or, oh, I don't have this person, because most teams, given the current state of affairs right now, and given the way that the protocols are being run, are going to have at least a handful of guys that end up on the COVID protocols, just the way that things are working and the way that they are kind of shaken out. We had guys on the COVID list when we were playing the Raiders. So did the Chargers, and so did the Texans. In fact, the Texans had a whack of guys that were on the COVID list. I think I heard something like 10 or 11. Yeah. I mean, they had a massive list that were on the COVID list in terms of players on that COVID list. Now, when you look ahead to what we have, and I think it needs to be mentioned, because you made a comment about like, oh, if they have to play practice squad guys, then that's unfortunate. I know, like, playing teams that are like that. Well, we lost both our starting linebackers basically in like the early third or so of the year, and we've been playing a recent signee in Kenny Young and a practice squad guy in Jonas Griffith ever since. So I don't think it's a fair comment. And by the way, I mean, Jonas Griffith made it to basically an honorable mention in the Mile High Mountain in terms of how well he was playing. So I don't think it's fair to basically point the finger at some of your practice squad guys or some of your recent signings as reasons why you necessarily lost the game. I think it's up to you as a team to develop players, to coach up players, and more importantly, to bring in the right players to back up your starters so that you can prepare for what the inevitable is going to be for at least the near term in the near future at the NFL, which is the fact that they're going to try and protect their players. And certain players, when they test positive for COVID-19, are going to be placed on a special COVID list, and there's testing protocols to try and keep everyone safe. Now, when you look at this upcoming game, I think it's going to be a little bit more of the same. I think you're going to see a lot of the same stuff that you saw when we played the Chargers the last go round, except to your point, I think you're going up with a slightly more banged up team, which means that you can potentially see better results from it. And that's saying something, because we had some pretty good results against the Chargers the first time we played them. I think that you're going to see Javonte Williams have himself quite a game. I think that we're going to have some better luck in the running game, certainly more so than we did against the Raiders. That was we'll just say not good, and that's being generous. And then I hope you're also going to see Melvin Gordon have a bit of a bounce back game too, because he did not have a very good game against the Raiders either. And then I think you're going to start seeing guys like Jerry Jeudy and Noah Fant and Albert O, hopefully, if Pat Shurmur can remember how to scheme a game properly, have those crossing routes that he's been now adding into the playbook in the recent weeks. But I think they're going to be working a lot better against the Chargers. I went back and watched the Houston game this past week, and the Chargers linebackers, once you kind of got just on the other side of the defensive line between the linebackers and the D-line, the crossing routes were working really well against them. So I think that's a spot where we can really exploit and guys, mismatch guys like your Noah Fant, your Albert O, and even Saubert has shown that he's really good at making those kind of short crossings and get the yards after catch. I think we can have some pretty good success there.
Agreed. And, that just reminded me of, I never actually thought about this, but when Senor Alvarez called Justin Herbert Herbie, I thought that was hilarious, because when I think of Herbie, I think of the freaking car, not of Justin Herbert. So I thought it was great. But just kind of, you're totally right, Rich. The way to beat the Chargers is doing the exact same thing we did before, which is limit the throws Justin Herbert can make. Now, it's looking more likely that he's not going to have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams again going forward, which is his number two, his top two targets. But he might have Guyton, who hasn't had a stellar year like he did last year, but he has been a flash in the pan. So just basically the front defensive line just has to make it real uncomfortable for Justin Herbert in the pocket. Justin Herbert, even though he can run, he's really not a mobile quarterback. He's not great throwing the ball while he's moving. That's how most of his picks, matter of fact, have been made, is when he tries to throw off the back of his foot. He's not that type of quarterback. So if you make him uncomfortable, then, scrimmaging and forcing him to throw the ball is great, increases the chance of a turnover. Now, he is a pretty mobile guy, so you don't want him running for yards either, because he can get downfield if he needs to in a pinch before he slides down. And just basically Justin Jackson, he put up a really good numbers in fantasy if you had him. I think he had 25 or 26, I believe.
No, he had 32. So can I tell you a story about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had him in my fantasy. I had him. He was on my bench. And I had attempted to make a swap to bring him as my flex, because I had a feeling that he was going to have a pretty good game with Eckler being out. And the Chargers have generally run the ball, and I knew the Texans were susceptible to the run. So I had a funny feeling that he was going to be kind of like, that breakout guy, that one that there's one every week, right? And in fantasy, we're like, oh my God, did you see that random guy? And then everyone runs and grabs him, and he has a horrible game, like the next 4. And then they say, drop him.
That was me with Hunter Henry.
Right. So, so unfortunately, I wasn't able to make the trade in time, and the Bucs played, and my flex guy played that game, and I was not willing to start him as one of my starting running backs, which also turned out to be a mistake on my part, because I thought he was going to beat my flex guy, but I didn't think he was going to beat my top 2 guys, which are actually pretty good running backs, and he ended up beating them all. So, dang it all.
Yeah, I'm there with you, man.
And what's worse is I lost because of that decision.
Yeah, I lost too, and I'm out. This is probably the farthest I've made it in fantasy in like 4 or 5 years in terms of playoff contention. So, but shout out to my friend Amanda. Good luck to her in the fantasy playoffs in our other fantasy league. But just going forward, Rich, it's
A
just
Broncos
based
uniform.
a Broncos uniform. It's just basically kind of repeating what we did the first time, and the Broncos can pull a win. And this win would mean a lot because it would be a road win, Rich, which is something that the Broncos have not been able to do. I don't think they've had a really big road win since their win in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken, uh, which was kind of like a huge surprise. Nobody expected the Broncos to go in there and handle the Cowboys the way they did. And I should know because I was there. So it was great to see in person. It was an even better feeling as a road game. But just the fact that the Broncos can play spoiler, and even if it means they keep their playoff hopes alive just for a little bit longer up until the end, I mean, it would feel great. But it's any given Sunday, Rich. We don't know what's going to happen come Sunday. We don't know who's going to catch what, who's going to be inactive, who's going to be a surprise scratch, what boneheaded plays Vic Fangio is going to decide to challenge and not win, what offensive runs Pat Shermer's not going to run, and what tomfoolery Tom McMahon is going to pull out of whatever cap he wears on his head in terms of botching special teams for another week. But even with all that discretion, Rich, this should be a game for the Broncos to win because the Broncos are healthier. They're coming off another loss, and usually teams that come off a loss, especially teams like the Broncos, are usually a lot more hungrier for a win. Don't get me wrong. The Chargers, I'm pretty sure they're not only feeling embarrassed to losing to a team like Houston and they want to win, but they're just not at a point or at a capacity to kind of be willing to go out there and win. And as good as Justin Herbert might be, unfortunately, he cannot play defense on his own. He cannot play special teams on his own. He can't be the running back on his own. There's only so much he can do. And the last time he tried to do too much, the Broncos were able to punish him for it. So that's what I'm kind of hoping the Broncos do in terms of shutting down Justin Herbert. Just make him uncomfortable in the pocket, force him to make throws that he's not comfortable with. And hell, we could see Patrick Surtain have another big game against them the second time around.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's possible that we could do something like that. I also think it's important to note is that a good portion of our defensive starters are at least healthy or healthier. I think it's probably better to say at this stage of the season. And so most of them are going to be able to play for us, barring any more kind of, late entries or late positives in terms of, the testing and whatnot. So I think that says a lot too, is that we have a little bit more of our expected starters. I think it's probably a good way of putting it too. Our linebacking core is basically completely different than the starting of the season. I actually happen to think our new linebackers, the ones we have in now, have actually progressed a little bit better and shown out a little bit more. And I think now that we have Chubb back on the outside, that's really improved the outside rush and allowed for the rotational guys who I think we should be seeing Weatherly and Chubb a lot more. And I think we should be seeing Cooper and Chubb a lot more. And I think Mintz is still on the COVID list. But again, if Mintz is back, I'd like to see Mintz get rotated in there as well to really start showcasing that future depth and giving them some playing time. But ladies and gentlemen, we are absolutely coming up to the very end of the show today. I think we got all of your questions. We answered to them to the best of our ability, and we try to give you some interesting insight into the Chargers game, what to expect, what I'd like to see, and what you'd like to see. Before we go, did you want to maybe speculate as to a score?
I'm going to say the Broncos win it, and I'm going to say 30. I like to stay within the 30 range. So I'm going to say 30-21 Denver. I think the Chargers get some garbage time touchdowns.
So I'm going to say that the Broncos can continue their streak by keeping the team under 20. I thought that the Raiders might be able to crack that code, but I think that the Raiders are a better team than the Chargers. And I do think that Derek Carr is certainly a better quarterback overall in the league right now as it stands. I just think he's got a little bit more veteran prowess in the league, and I think that can really kind of give certain younger defensive players some fits. So I see us holding them to somewhere in the 17 range. And I think that this could be one of those 31-17 type games that you see a fair amount of that seem to be a common kind of score combination in the NFL. So my guess is going to be 31-17 in this game.
Right.
For the Broncos, obviously.
Of course. Guys, unfortunately, we are out of time. But thank you guys so much for joining Rich and I here tonight on Broncos Talk. And, unfortunately, as we're getting close to the end of the season, I know it didn't pan out to the way we all wanted to, but keep your heads up high, keep your flags waving, and just let's keep the support going for our boys as we get to the end of the season, as I said. And of course, if you guys enjoyed what you guys saw here tonight on Broncos Talk, please make sure to hit that subscribe button so you get live notifications when we go live. Hit that thumbs up button wherever you're watching us on social media so that you also are up to par whenever we release any new content. And of course, if you like what you see here on the MHRT Network, please make sure to watch our other shows. On Thursdays, we have the MHRT Network podcast, which is the flagship show, which it has myself, the Boss Mundungus, Mr. Glenn Hauser, who you saw in the chat here earlier, Mr. Boggins, and myself. So we go live every single Thursday at 7654. On Fridays, we have the Nothing Rhymes With podcast with our good friends Johnny and Isaiah, who you also saw in the chat here earlier tonight. Their show is on Friday at 7654. And of course, we have the pregame show, The Neighborhood, which airs just before every pregame Broncos game. And we're down to the very last two, and hopefully we get one or two more in the playoffs, maybe even more, depending on how far our boys can take us. But you don't want to miss out, and you don't want to have to wait until we get more shows for the next season. And Rich, before we go and do our very special outro, it's the very last show of 2021, Rich. And you know what? Let me just say that it's been a pleasure having to sit here next to you every single weekend and, talk Broncos with you. And it doesn't matter how far you are. It's been great. I love sitting here talking in Denver with you, meeting you and your family before and after the show. And I ran out of drink, but here's to, another good year with you, my brother. May 2022 be a prosperous year for you and me. Oh, I should drink that. So, and as well for you guys, Happy New Year to everybody here in the chat. Happy New Year to everybody listening to us after the fact on audio. Please make sure you give us a thumbs up on Apple, Amazon, Anchor, wherever it is you guys are listening to us to. Send us messages. Hit us up on Twitter. My Twitter's at A6'10Mexican. My co-host at Richie, RICHEH. Please make sure to just hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. And yes, we are the odd couple if there ever was one. So, Rich, are you ready, my friend?
I'm ready to go.
Here we go. The very last one of 2021. Well, actually, no, because we still have Thursday. So for Broncos Talk anyway. My high five. Woo! Guys, thank you guys so much. Happy New Year to everybody. We will see you all next year, 2022. For Rich, I'm Adon. Good night. And as always,
go Broncos.